if reincarnation is true, I'm going to put them on the bottom of my list, maybe towards the bottom.
Along with muskrats. I don't want to come back as a muskrat or as a mallard.
Todd, you and I need to up our fashion game.
Yeah, we do. Next to this guy?
Yeah.
I know it.
It was a need to have purchase, and so I went for it.
A little bit, maybe too much redhead heads on canvasback bodies, but I won't quibble. Yep, and as you get older, I feel like now I live vicariously through students and technicians who work for me, and I just love the day or two I get to go out in the field with them and check nests with them, and they slow down so I can keep up, I think.
Delta Waterfowl is the duck hunters organization, and what we're doing is managing out here to increase duck production.
The Voice of the Duck Hunter, a podcast presented by Delta Waterfowl. Brought to you by Rig'em and Lucky Duck.
Welcome back to Delta Waterfowl's The Voice of the Duck Hunter podcast. I'm your host, Joel Brice. Today we're joined by two highly respected waterfowl scientists, Dr. Todd Arnold and Dr. VonBank, who've recently joined Delta Waterfowl's research team. Todd comes to us after more than 2 decades as a professor at the University of Minnesota, while Jay arrives from the U.S. Geological Survey's Northern Prairie Wildlife Research Center in Jamestown, North Dakota. Together, they bring a solid mix of field experience, academic insight, and a deep understanding of the science that supports conservation. We're going to talk about their backgrounds, the projects they'll lead at Delta, and what their work means for ducks and duck hunters. Plus, you're sure to hear some facts about ducks that are just plain cool and interesting. With that introduction, let's get started. Dr. Todd Arnold, Dr. VonBank, welcome to the Delta Waterfowl podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, welcome to Delta also. Todd, how long on the job?
About a month I've been here. Yep.
And Jay?
6 weeks.
6 weeks?
Yep.
Well, so this podcast, for those that aren't watching it, you're going to have to pick up some voice recognition. So, Todd, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Okay, so there's Todd. Jay, you?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Well, for those listening, I know we do some of these podcasts, we record them virtually, but hey, we all work in the same office right here in Bismarck, North Dakota. So we're sitting in our studio, having a chat here for about an hour, getting to know you guys.
I'm excited.
Sounds good.
Great. Todd, we're going to start with you. I know you're Dr. Todd Arnold, but it's okay if I just call you Todd?
Please do.
Jay?
Same. Yes, please.
Right.
I'm in trouble if I get called doctor, usually.
Yeah, what's your middle name?
William.
William?
Todd William Arnold. That's what I used to get when I was little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine's Seth. I don't know. I've never been in love with that one, especially I feel like I have 3 first names. Joel, Seth, Brice, and so
Ditto.
it's just a little bit confusing for people at times.
Mm-hmm.
So you came to Delta most recently from the University of Minnesota.
That's correct. And I was there as a professor in the Department of Fisheries, Wildlife, and Conservation Biology for 23 years.
23 years.
Yep.
That's a big career change after that amount of time.
It is a big career change, and I've been at it long enough. I probably could have considered retiring, but I'm not ready to retire yet. So a career change seemed like a good thing to be doing.
Yeah. We'll jump back just a little bit back and forth. Jay, just so you don't sit and wait for Todd to talk about his life. And you came to Delta most recently from Northern Prairie?
From USGS Northern Prairie Wildlife Research Center in Jamestown, North Dakota. So just down the road.
And you were there for how many years?
About 5 years.
5?
Yep. And bounced around before that, school and postdoc, and been there for 5 years, and now the transition over to Bismarck.
Sweet. So back to Todd. Why don't you I think you guys are going to be you guys are going to be out and about, meeting with, donors, members, other scientists. So for those that aren't familiar with your careers or your backgrounds, Todd, why don't you share with the listener, where are you from? Talk about just give us the 2-minute version of you from, hey, this is what I want to do and how I got there, where I'm from, and things like that.
Okay. Getting into 2 minutes might be tough, but I'll take it as a 2-minute
4.
warning.
4.
No, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. I grew up in Minnesota, and I got interested in wildlife because I love to fish and hunt and trap. And I went to school at the University of Minnesota for my undergrad, went to Missouri for a master's, went to University of Western Ontario for my PhD. And I got into waterfowl kind of by a back door. I was interested in predators, so I did my master's work on mink predation on waterfowl. And, I'm going to admit it, but I did my PhD on coots, and then finally I saw the light and started doing work on ducks, per se.
Well, mink eating coots? No.
Mink do eat coots. That's, yeah. Some people might think that's the benefit of coots, is that they get in the way of mink eating ducks first, but I'm not sure that's correct.
I was just trying to help you
Yeah.
with that one. So you said that you've always been a hunter
Yep, I always have.
and a trapper. Don't hear that too much.
I grew up during the sort of the peak of fur prices, so I was able to put myself through a couple of years of university trapping muskrats when they were worth $7 a piece, when $7 was worth a lot more than $7 is worth now.
Wow. And looking back at your resume, Todd, you've kind of hit all the big stops. So University of Minnesota, a prominent academic institution, senior scientist at DU Canada.
That's correct. I was there for a couple of years, and I was with Delta for a couple of years up at Delta Marsh before that. So I was bouncing around a lot, kind of like Jay in my postdoc years, I guess.
Well, then you settled in, so maybe we get to keep you for a little while?
That's the hope. I don't want to keep bouncing around.
No. How are you adjusting to Bismarck?
I'm getting used to it. I haven't lived here that long, and I haven't formally got a place yet. I'm in an apartment, but I'll be looking for a house soon enough.
Well, it kind of grew on me. I moved all over the place, and when I settled here, I was planning on staying here for about a year, and it just, the job, the community, just kind of grew on me. And yeah, it's been 24 years, and
Still
I like
here.
it. I still like it. Yeah, absolutely. Jay, let's do the same thing with you. Where are you from? Talk about, some of your academics, your hunting background, if you want to share that as well. Rig'em Right is an industry leader in high-quality waterfowl gear and proud partner of Delta Waterfowl. From blind bags, backpacks, and gun cases to dog vests, dog stands, and dog blinds, Rig'em Right has you and your hunting dog covered for long days in the duck marsh. And even more exciting, Rig'em Right has launched its new mainline series decoys that are lightweight, durable, and they look awesome. Check out Rig'em Right's complete lineup at www.rig'emright.com or wherever you buy your hunting gear.
Yeah, so I'm also a Minnesota native, so central Minnesota. Grew up in the country on a farm and was outside all the time and wanted to keep that going. And so I went to Bemidji State University for my undergrad, actually in fisheries, because I wanted to be on a boat forever and I did not want to be in an office. And pretty quickly, I don't know, about maybe junior year or so, I realized that I needed to kind of be in wildlife, waterfowl specifically, because all I was doing was hunting, duck and goose hunting up north. But I was kind of too late in my undergrad to transition without staying for a few extra years, so I decided I'd finish that and try and find a master's degree that bridged the gap between the fisheries or aquatic biology and waterfowl. And so I found a master's at Forbes Biological Station and the kind of famed Illinois River Valley. And I went to Western Illinois University, and my project there was on invasive wetland plants in the Illinois River system, but I was at Forbes Belrose Waterfowl Research Center at Forbes Biological Station, and so I was around all of these amazing duck people, and I got to do lots of technician help with all of their duck projects going on, so I filled in a little bit there, and then from there moved to a PhD at Texas A&M University Kingsville and Cesar Kleberg Wildlife Research Institute on movement ecology of white-fronted geese. Finished that in 2020, and I did a brief stint as a postdoc at the University of Missouri, and then moved to Jamestown. But all of this got started. Like I said, I grew up on a farm in the country, was crawling around fields and marshes, and got into duck hunting, and kind of all needed to be centered around duck hunting in my life and waterfowl in general. And so that's kind of how I got there. I snaked around a little bit, but I got there eventually.
Yeah. So I want to ask you guys both, I think every scientist has, their own drive and their own background, and the research that they conduct tends to be an extension of what you're most interested in. Todd, how do you describe yourself, your interest, your background, and have there been areas of waterfowl science that you've been particularly intrigued by and therefore maybe would be in your publication record?
I've always been really interested in breeding biology, nesting ecology, and so that's really what got me excited. And you can go out and put on a pair of waders and find 100 coot nests in a day if you want to. And but there were always canvasbacks and redheads too. And in my younger years, I thought of myself as a field biologist, mostly doing research, and that's what I wanted to do. As I got older, I realized I better learn how to work with data too, because I can't put on waders and nest search like I used to be able to.
Yeah, I've always found I think that's maybe it's a natural progression, when you're like in high school, college, I want to be outside all the time. And of course you do. But I think at some point, for me anyway, I had this realization that if I'm the only one collecting the data, then that's all I have to talk about. So the bigger the project, the bigger the data set, the more the collaborators, you just have more of a reach. I don't know, is that?
Yeah. And as you get older, I feel like now I live vicariously through students and technicians who work for me. And I just love the day or two I get to go out in the field with them and check nests with them. And they slow down so I can keep up, I think.
Well, there are scientists out there in the world that they have a reputation of collecting all kinds of data but never sharing or publishing it. And I'm just looking at this 130 plus peer-reviewed papers, 150 plus conference presentations for you.
Yep.
So you like to get your stuff out there.
I like to get my stuff out there, but I feel like I probably have a backlog of that many that I'm owed the world yet too, and I don't think I have enough time to get them all out.
Yeah, I better share then.
Better share. Yep.
Put it on a shelf for Todd's data sets for other people to get after.
But I certainly believe in sharing data. I mean, you don't collect data for yourself, and if you can't get it published yourself, share it with others and let them get it out there for the world to see.
Yeah, well, I heard you're dusting off an old predator management data set of Mike Buxton's right now.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah.
And it's like a good wine that stores well in the cellar. It's none the worse for wear.
Just dust it off and pop the cork and start pouring.
Exactly.
Jay, how about you? What research are you most interested in, and maybe out in the science community, what are you known for?
Yeah, I think that my interest kind of got started. I'll back up and tell a little story what I researched. But I got into competition duck calling contests pretty hard when I was like 14 to 20-ish, and was fairly competitive for a little bit, and then started getting my butt kicked when I didn't have much time anymore. But traveled all over the country to go into these duck calling contests, and I blew on the world stage in Stuttgart a couple of times. And so but traveling to these places and seeing the waterfowl that were there, going to Arkansas for the first time and seeing from Minnesota, we didn't have snow geese at the time, right? So going down and seeing these huge clouds of snow geese, or going to Kansas and seeing all the white fronts, and just when I was younger, just got my brain, why are they here and not there? And we grew up in Minnesota, why did we not see snow geese and white fronts? And so that kind of piqued my interest in learning about how understanding how waterfowl move and migration ecology and learning distributions and so that's where I eventually, once I finished my kind of tour of the natural resources field to get to waterfowl, I wanted to study migration and movement ecology, and that's where a lot of my program lies right now, is in using transmitters to understand movement, migration, natural ecology of birds, but also applied science. So one of the things that I really love and try to incorporate into all of my work is answering a question, applied science, so that we can use these data and answer something for a manager or for a partner or somebody to make a decision on. And so that's kind of where my program is right now, and it's everything from mottle ducks to sandhill cranes and white fronts and pintails and mallards and lots of different species, and answering different questions for kind of each of those, and then in some cases tying them all together to looking at bigger scale pictures.
I have these side bar questions that I want to ask, but I thought I should just kind of maybe reserve that for another conversation. But it was more just my scientific curiosity. So this isn't about me. This is about the listener. So let's keep learning about you guys. So Todd, what motivated you to switch over to Delta? I don't want to make you sound like you should be doing something else. But you had this long, impressive career at University of Minnesota. But what sparked your interest in coming over here to Delta?
I don't know. Anytime you do the same thing for a long time, you can start to get into a pattern of coasting. And so there were some new challenges here. And so I think really they were big research questions and the ability to focus on them, big scale. And, also with the goal of doing premier waterfowl research, stuff that hasn't been done. There's a lot of stuff I can do with data that has been accumulating here for a long time. There's a lot I can do with stuff I've been continuing to do. But thinking about the future and what might we do if we can get people motivated to ask these big questions and raise the money that it would take to do some of these challenging questions of the future. That's really exciting to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would imagine that as in the academic world, being your own fundraiser is probably a little stressful too. So that must be an attraction because, Delta, with the relationships that we have and being known as the Duck Hunters organization, to have an organization championing, the organization's research and your role in it, that must be attractive as well.
It's very attractive to not have to try to convince an audience that doesn't care about ducks why you should be so interested in funding research on, hey, what's happening with sex ratios in ducks? Why do we have so many drakes nowadays? And to talk to an audience, a Delta audience, everybody's interested in that, and they want to do something about it. They're concerned about it. A big audience from the university, it probably wouldn't interest anybody.
I suppose. Yeah, you're living in a duck world.
Yep.
Northern Prairie had I was there for about 6 months earlier in my career, but it had a history. I think there was a transition taking place then when I was there, that it was known as the premier waterfowl science institution or location for many, many years. And I don't want to describe this as a bad thing, but it started to diversify and waterfowl became one aspect. Is it interesting? Is it attractive to you, Jay, to jump into a completely waterfowl focused group of people?
Yeah, I was just going to say that Todd's last point there is one of my major points. Like, I kept finding myself working on projects that were, kind of right up Delta's alley, right? Integrating hunting and movement and landscape ecology in different parts of the country. And so, it's a natural fit, I think, to come to an organization where that's the sole purpose. And Northern Prairie still has a strong waterfowl program. There's a few great scientists there, but diversified a lot, and into lots of other things. And so for me, when I kept coming back to the same kind of program that Delta runs, and so it's a natural kind of fit.
Yeah. Do you guys find so now who was? I guess I haven't formed this question out. You're seeing me cogitate out loud here, but when you guys were at University of Minnesota, you're at Northern Prairie. Did you have an audience in mind? Because here your audience are duck hunters, right? And so did you, when you were at University of Minnesota or Northern Prairie, who was your audience? And it might be a different answer for each one of you.
Yeah. In my case, it was an audience of people who cared about waterfowl, who were duck hunters, by and large. Maybe a little bit bigger audience that was interested in conservation, but when you looked at conservation issues, birds were declining across the board, except ducks weren't declining. Well, to me, that was a wonderful success story, but it meant that you don't need money to work on ducks because we need that money for the grassland songbirds and everything else that really is declining.
How about you, Jay? Did you have an audience that motivated you?
Yeah, USGS is the science branch of the federal government, and so our audience was our partners. Like, we did science for partner relationships and to help them answer questions, applied science. And so it was state agencies, it was federal other federal agencies, and trying to do science to help those partners answer questions. And so that's kind of what where I was geared at there.
Yeah. I have this prediction, and it's not a better or worse situation than where you were prior, but one of the things that I've found at Delta, and we collaborate with so many wonderful state and federal biologists and researchers, at our Delta careers here. But one of the things that I think it's just must be really difficult when you're not daily in conversation with members and duck hunters. Go to a banquet or two here and there, go to events like the expo where you're just surrounded by duck hunters. It's such a daily reminder here anyway, and of who we work for. And I wonder at times it just must be challenging in the academic system or the federal government system, because you're not in daily contact with the duck hunting constituent. So I predict that that's going to be a big component of your careers going forward. It's just this daily reminder of why you're doing the work.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
You can't get away from it here.
You can't
walk down the halls. You can't go to the men's room without going past 27 stuffed birds and decoys and pictures of all-time great scientists and conservationists.
Yep.
Well, and you get if you haven't already, hold on tight, but you're going to get emails directed straight at you of just questions from, and that's one of the things that I love at Delta, and I hope you guys love it too, is that from the first day I worked here to now, everybody at Delta can be reached. Somebody wants to call you up, they have a question, they're going to learn about you from this podcast, an article, read your byline in a magazine, they're going to want to reach out, and I just find that so motivating, and to get out on the road, go to a banquet, and it's just find it really re-energizing to be around folks.
Yeah, no doubt. Like I would try and incorporate as much field work as I could for a lot of those reasons in previous careers, just to kind of keep base, with the people where we're doing the work, and duck hunters and the folks that are kind of the recipients of some of the research that we're doing, or maybe helped pay for it in some way for state dollars or license stamps. Like that's kind of who keeps the boat afloat, right? So it was really important to touch base with those. So you try to do that as much as you can and get out in the field. But here, you're surrounded by it all the time.
It is ground floor work, absolutely. You guys have now been working together for a few weeks, and I don't know, did your careers cross paths prior to Delta?
They didn't. I mean, I've got lots of co-authors I've worked with. Jay hasn't been one. We'll rectify that soon enough.
Yeah.
But
we circled each other. Our circles of peers and colleagues were intertwined, but Todd and I hadn't directly worked together before.
Well, it sounds like your backgrounds kind of complement each other. Have you guys gotten a sense? Does either one of you want to step out there and just kind of describe how your careers, your expertise complement each other? Have you been able to pick up on that yet?
I'm really excited the kind of stuff Jay works with in terms of GPS transmitted birds and really fine scale movements. And I deal with really coarse stuff. I've worked with banding data, and the strength of banding data, I guess, as it goes back into the 60s, 50s even. But we know two things from a banded bird. Usually we only know one thing. The band went out here and was never seen again. Mm-hmm. We maybe know a second thing. A hunter harvested it here, and that might be multiple years later. And I can draw a straight line between 2 points, and Jake can obviously do that too. But his technology can make 100 lines back and forth of what did this bird do in between.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Todd's work needs no introduction, right? He's a world-recognized population ecologist, and I'm super excited to try and integrate some of our fine-scale work with larger scale models. Like, I think it works both ways, where, kind of fine-scale coming up and using estimates of things that we're interested to inform things that Todd's interested in, I think is a really cool idea, and something we've kind of been talking about already, exploring how they integrate together.
Well, and then you bring in Frank Rohr's, leadership, and then Jake Bouchaw, who is your guys' right-hand man when it comes to getting stuff done in the field. So
exactly.
I think we have a pretty impressive team.
I agree.
There you go. No more introduction required. So Todd, you've published extensively on hunter harvest. And I'm going to throw you a question here. What big questions do you think still remain about hunter harvest affects waterfowl populations?
That's a really complicated question to ask, and that waterfowl span the spectrum from blue-winged teal to, emperor geese or tundra swans. and that there's no one-size-fits-all answer to that. And it's much easier to harvest things like mallards and blue-winged teal and wood ducks without having an impact. You've got to be a lot more careful with the things that are longer lived, the geese, the swans, the sea ducks, and harvest all the drakes you want. You're not going to have an impact. I want to share that with everybody before the season opens if you're farther south than here. But what we have to worry about are adult hens, and for some species we harvest so few of them it really doesn't matter. But for other species, harvesting a few in terms of percent might be enough to have an impact, and so that's where we need to be more careful. So I can't answer that simply unless you tell me, okay, let's talk about this particular species, then I'd share my opinions.
Okay, so we're going to go down that road then.
Yeah.
So you've talked quite a bit about skewed sex ratios, particularly in mallards and pintails.
Yep.
Can you give a little bit of background about, I'll say air quotes, normal sex ratios and just kind of the shift that you've observed? And then I guess the other part of it is, why should a hunter really pay attention to this subject?
Sex ratios have always been male biased in ducks, and Aldo Leopold pointed that out back in the 1930s, and from the very beginning of harvest data in the 1960s, it was clear that there were more mallard drakes than hens, more pintail drakes than hens. But, maybe in the realm of 1.5 drakes per hen or up to 2 drakes per hen, and that's pushing more towards 2 to 3. And so it's changed through time, and that's the important thing, that it's gotten more and more male biased. And work we've done suggests hunting has not contributed at all to that. In fact, hunting helps bring sex ratios back towards an even drake to hen ratio, because whether they want to or not, hunters selectively harvest drakes, and so that helps bring the sex ratio back in line. When they're born, it's a 50-50 sex ratio, so that doesn't change things, other than if it's a good production year and we've got male biased sex ratios, putting a lot of young birds out there at a 50-50 sex ratio helps. So the real cause of it is what's happening to hens outside the hunting season, that mortality source. And, we speculate that predation during the nesting period is the only thing female dabbling ducks do that really makes them vulnerable. They're ducks. They're supposed to live on the water. They spend 35 days pretending they're a pheasant in the uplands, and they're not very good at it. I mean, they do their best, but they're not that good at getting away from coyotes and foxes and things like that. So that's what I think is the problem: increased predation on hens.
It's always the question, though. What do you do with that?
Well, I mean, you've got predator management is something that nobody's ever done a study to say does hen survival increase on predator management sites. We know that nest success increases from lots of studies. We know that brood survival usually increases from a few studies. We can guess. I mean, it makes good sense that that would increase hen survival, but I guess it depends on what predators you're removing. Skunks aren't going to be taking ducks. I don't think a skunk could catch a duck.
Right.
And so it's got to be the canids, I think. Mink as well.
Yeah, I would imagine a hen house probably plays a very similar role, providing that protection for the hen.
It does, and in my time with DU analyzing data that they had from radio-marked hens, hen houses was the only habitat structure or type that females nested in where there was zero mortality. Now, there weren't a lot of them, but there were enough of them, and everything else, there was always some mortality during the nesting season, especially during incubation. And things like hay fields were some of the worst, and that was a combination of predators as well as machinery killing hens.
I would suppose some of the shift in land use practices, just like you're saying there, you could lose a hen during the haying period.
Yep.
So a lot of ducks have a lot of challenges.
Oh, it's hard to be a duck.
Yeah, if reincarnation is true, I'm going to put them on my but the bottom of my list, maybe towards the bottom.
Along with muskrats. I don't want to come back as a muskrat or as a mallard.
Bottom of the list. When I make my list, get them down there. Jay, let's shift over to you. So one of your specialties, as we've talked about, is tracking migration movements. White-front geese is the one that I'm familiar with. But what are some of the latest tools? Are there other tools that you've used more recently? Other, like cameras, drones, transmitters, what's some of the cool tech that you've been using or interested in, and what are some of the advantages that offer us?
Sure. Yeah, drones are certainly one of them that I'm excited to get a little bit more use out of at Delta here. I haven't used them in my own program as extensively, but Delta has done a wonderful job developing drone technology for use in brood detection and brood abundance monitoring, and a few students working on that right now. It's really exciting stuff for an area of our field that broods have always been really tough to study, and so this is it's really exciting to start incorporating that and really understanding brood ecology. In terms of transmitters, transmitters, everyone's seen these now. Like they're small backpacks. They collect unbelievable data. You can get sub-minute data in some circumstances if you want to, a GPS location. But one of the cool sensors that not many folks are using, but we're trying to increase that right now, is called an accelerometer. And an accelerometer, you've all got one in your cell phone and on your smartwatch. It's a small device that essentially measures acceleration, movement in any direction, and through a suite of so that's in the transmitter, and we get one of those readings. You can get them every couple of minutes. So in most of our projects, we get an acceleration reading every 6 minutes. And what we do with that acceleration is you can do a couple of things. One of them is you can understand waterfowl behavior specific. So like with through a suite of machine learning models and known video footage of these things, of birds in the wild or in captivity, tagged with known behaviors, right? You can apply it through statistical algorithms to wild birds. And so every 6 minutes we can tell whether that bird is walking or stationary or it's feeding or it's flying. And you can really build out kind of unbelievable data sets of you have the GPS locations, and you also know what they're doing, where they're doing it. And so we've published a couple of papers on this now, but I think it's starting to gain a bit more traction, and the power of not only understanding where they are, but what they're doing when they're there is a really powerful tool, and can help lots of folks understand how to better manage these waterfowl. The other thing it can do, there's a metric called overall dynamic body acceleration, which is in the literature, it's a proxy for energy expenditure. And so this accelerometer uses those values to calculate overall dynamic body acceleration. And we're in the process right now of developing predictive layers of energy expenditure on the landscape, and you can see where it's really high and where it's really low, and thinking about how land managers, whether they're private land owners who have a club and are doing moist soil management in the south, or federal agencies on refuge, whoever you are, looking at how waterfowl energetics occur on your landscape could really play a big role in how you think about managing your landscape in different scenarios. And what if we plant this here and that there to help reduce energy expenditure? So it's a lot of potential that's really kicking off.
So you could, it's almost like a sophisticated step counter.
Sure. Yeah.
In a sense, it could tell when you're moving, but you could tell how much time they're spending feeding, loafing. I would imagine whether they're nesting or not.
Yeah. So there's a few groups of folks, and we're working on that right now. You get this really, waterfowl are moving around, and then once incubation starts, it kind of flatlines, and so you can really pinpoint when birds are initiating incubation and how long they did it for, and presume nest success because of that, and things like that. So that's kind of where the state of the field is right now in terms of that technology.
So you talked about machine learning. Is that another way to describe AI, artificial intelligence? Or
yeah. So it's just a portion of the process of doing the analyses to use usually we end up on a random forest machine learning algorithm, and that's kind of what's been the most predictive for us. But it essentially identifies patterns, right? So we give the data set, or we give the machine learning algorithm a set of known parameters. This is what feeding looks like. This is what stationary looks like. A whole bunch of those, and you train it to predict the wild behavior. So we never have to see that wild bird again, but we can tell you with some degree of confidence what it's doing.
That's interesting. Todd, just being so recently leaving the academic setting and then also disciplines outside of waterfowl, did you get a sense of any tech that's emerging that'll play an important role in waterfowl management or research?
Well, I'm certainly excited about all the stuff that Jay has just talked about, for sure. And it's not that new, but I'll reiterate what Jay said about drone technology and ability to figure out what's happening with broods. That's been one of our most limiting understandings of productivity. Is we know that nest success is important. I mean, it is. Nest success is really important. But to be honest, it's the only one we've really been able to study very well. And maybe brood survival is just as important, but there's only been a few studies that have been able to look at it. It's required telemetry and capturing the hen before the nest hatches. And boy, if drones can do that without having to use telemetry or in combination with telemetry, I think it can be a real game changer.
Yeah, that is the tech that I'm presently most interested in and are excited in. As a manager, I think we're going to get along real well, Jay. We are too, Todd. We're already getting along. So, but just when I come up with scientific questions, it's because I have an applied, a management-focused answer that I'm looking for. And with the Million Duck campaign looming large, it's really important for me and for the team that I work with to know with the greatest certainty that what we say we're accomplishing, we're actually accomplishing. And so I do see drones and the thermal cams and pair counts and brood counts just to be able to come up with an easier, maybe more repeatable estimate of production, to know that our tools are accomplishing the goals that we've set out for. So I'm really excited about that one, because I think we've all done at least all of us anyway, have done some form of nest searching on ATVs or seen videos on it. And in some ways it's fun, but I always say too, I remember the first time I ever got in a bobcat, like a skid steer, and started moving it around. I thought, oh, this is the most amazing, fun thing in the world, and it is. But about a half an hour later, I was looking at my watch. I'm like, this isn't as fun anymore. But cable chain dragging it becomes work. It's expensive, and it's more demanding, more intensive on the landscape. And when a landowner gives you permission to do that, they're giving you a lot.
Yep.
So to have less of a footprint on the landscape, I think it just can really increase our social license of getting work done on the prairies.
I entirely agree.
Yeah. So hopefully I'll put my vote in that type of research every single day. So let me know. Jay, you've mentioned to others, were you really interested in evaluating harvest data and models? Are there, and I think both of you are keenly interested in that, is there one aspect of harvest data or modeling that you guys are interested in or plan on looking at here at Delta?
I'm working on a project right now that and some of the emails went out in the last week or two. So if you're from North or South Dakota and you're a goose hunter, you just got invited to join our survey, our database. It's specifically looking at the parts collection survey and an alternative way to get at the proportion of species and age of geese harvested. And so it's centered around the idea of the parts collection survey. And the parts collection survey, that portion of it is where you send in your tail fans, your wingtips for geese, or your wings for ducks, and that's where we get our estimates of the proportion of harvest for age and species. And so for geese, it's what species, and then whether they're adults or juveniles, and then that gets extrapolated up through the harvest process to diary surveys and so on. There's some ideas that, given the changes in goose harvests and populations and migration ecology and everything that goes into is in the goose world, that there's that parts collection survey, you only get 10 envelopes to start, and you have to request more. And goose limits, for, let's just say for North Dakota regular season, is 8 Canada geese. Well, you could use your envelopes up, in 2 quick hunts, and then it takes some time to get some more. And so we think there's maybe some bias in kind of the proportionality of harvest. And so we're really interested in I've developed a new database right now that hunters can go and submit it without doing any parts. There's no tail fans, there's no wing tips to mail in. You just go on there, and we have it's essentially a diary survey and a parts collection survey combined, where you tell us how many geese you shot in a day, and then you just tell us how many were Canada geese, or how many were adult white-fronted geese and juvenile white-fronted geese, or adult snow geese and juvenile snow geese, and we can get the proportionality from there. And there's some specific questions, like one is snow geese, where the bag limit is, in some places it's 25, and other places it's higher or lower. But what parts get submitted to something where you're limited by 10 envelopes versus somewhere where you're not limited by anything? You can just tell us how many you harvested, and we can look at how that scales out through the season to the total proportions of age and species of birds that are harvested. Geese specifically for this study. But
Sounds like a good one. I'm interested in the results of that. Todd, how about you? Anything you're laser focused on in harvest world? Lucky Duck is a proud partner of Delta Waterfowl. While being an industry leader in waterfowl motion decoys is their focus, they have the hunter in mind when designing all of their products. From their 5-star crash-rated Lucky Duck kennel to their full line of predator hunting gear, they are committed to serving the hunter 365 days a year. Check out their wonderful line of products at www.luckyduck.com or at a local retailer near you.
Same thing. And harvest data, I think of the data that we depend on for doing population models in ducks. There's 3 components of it. There's the surveys, the BPOP surveys that are entirely done by professionals. There's band recovery data, where the banding gets done by wildlife professionals, but the recoveries all happen, or almost all happen, from hunters. So that's sort of a half citizen science. And then the harvest data is 100% citizen science, because you have to be a hunter to have harvested something. So that part of it. And if you get selected for parts collection data, now there's some, wing bee experts that need to identify everything, so we still need professionals to analyze the data, but it's 100% hunter, citizen contributed data. And to me, all 3 of those data streams are essential. And from any 2 of them, you can predict the other one, which would make you say, well, we don't need all of them then. Let's cut one out. Except they don't entirely agree with each other. So I want to have all 3 to figure out the slight kinks in the system, where we're making wrong assumptions, and figure things out better.
You guys are like artists in one way. So I'll expand on this, where I look at somebody can draw something, and I'm like, oh, that is just so beautiful, right? I can picture it, but I can't do it. And so you must see these data sets, Todd, in like some matrix type format, where just this beautiful mind of data and what you want to do with it. And I just look at it and go, it's just a bunch of numbers, Todd. Thank goodness for people like you guys.
Yeah, scrolling numbers on a green background. I'm not quite that individual from the matrix, but being able to identify the places where the data sets don't agree, and to come up with potential causes of it. What might the cause of this be? I mean, we're both focused on that, and we want better harvest data because it's a really important part of that. I think of it as a 3-legged stool of what we need for data to properly manage waterfowl populations. We need surveys of how many there are. We need banding and band recovery for survival. And the harvest survey is the only way we figure out productivity at a continental scale.
Yep. This is not, and I'll just mention, this is not a slight on any of the designs of the surveys or any of the people who undertake those surveys right now. This is just natural bias as things change and landscape changes. The hunter landscape changes, the waterfowl landscape changes, and these things kind of roll on, and we just need to keep, continuing to progress and advance some of these things as they age.
Well, you're right on with something, but I reflect on it. Just how technology and therefore the speed of communication has changed. And so a lot of if you go back into the 1950s, 60s, it was lick a stamp, wait 3 to 5 days for it to get there, give someone the chance to do something with it, lick a stamp, and like the quickest turnaround was 2 weeks, probably. And so now we can seamlessly communicate, instantaneously communicate with people. And so just that ability to have some type of a web-based log as opposed to cutting up, filling things out and sending in.
A band from the 60s or 70s would have said, "Avise, wash, DC," right? And did you know if you didn't have a buddy that had done it before, that you could actually just write "wash DC bird band" and you didn't need a zip code or anything? It would make it to the banding office. And now you can report a web address band on your phone from the blind and figure out before you get home where that bird was from. And as you said before, it would take weeks before you would figure out where that bird came from.
Yeah, if ever.
Yeah.
But that's a good point. It's not an indictment on the way things were. It's just literally, it's such a fluid and dynamic world, and things change. And social science has really helped, I think, with wildlife management in general. And this, I kind of go back to, I remember my first wildlife class that I sat in back as a freshman in college. I remember the professor, he said, all of you people who think you're gonna spend your career, holding ducks or, catching deer or whatever. Not a spin-off of that. There's that internet guy, Catching Deers, not that guy. Literally catching deer and doing something with it. But he said, you're sorely mistaken. You're going to spend 90% of your career dealing with people and 10% with the resource. And he couldn't have been more correct. But, I think at the end of the day, especially with the harvest work, it's you don't have anything to work with if hunters aren't turning it in. Jay, why don't you describe how valuable are hunters to the work that you've done?
Yeah, I think we've highlighted it a little bit in all of these scenarios and projects that we've talked about. Is banding data are solely, it's hunter derived, right? Like that's where we get it. It's the largest citizen science project anywhere in the world, and it's all because 99% of it is because of hunters. Maybe Todd has an actual stat for how many bands come from hunters versus bird watchers or other things, but it's the vast majority come from hunters. The same goes with like even the little things, which aren't always that little, like going out to catch white-fronted geese or mallards or pintails on a where are they? We talk to hunters, and hunters say, "Come on out to my place. I won't duck hunt this weekend, and you guys can try and catch some birds and things like that." Like it's invaluable. And then the other really cool thing that hunters always do is we have these chats, these tailgate chats when I'm sitting on a spotting scope, waiting to shoot a net or something, and a hunter pulls up and they ask me a question that I hadn't thought about before because they're a local from the area, and they know how those birds work, right? They know what timing and what fields they hit and when they shift from sorghum to winter wheat and what goes on. And so then it's like, they have a really great perspective that is always enjoyed, and a lot of times makes you think about stuff a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm. Let's switch over to the role of students. Todd, as you know very well, Delta has a long history of training students. Specifically, most, if not all, the research that we've done historically has been done by master's students or PhD students. Do you guys enjoy working with students?
I enjoy working with students a lot, and you think about a research project, you might think that the number one most important output is what answers are you going to get from this study. But if it's student-driven research, the most important output might be a future professional that stays working on waterfowl for the rest of their career, or even for another 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, their students are always awesome. Like it's so fun to be on both sides, right? You feel like as an advisor or a mentor to students, like it's really cool to watch their eyes light up when you talk about something that they didn't know. But the opposite is also equally true. Mm-hmm. Maybe more so, like when a student is really fired up and is thinking and working on their one project for 24 hours a day, and they say something to you and it's like, oh my goodness, how have I not thought of that? It's so, yeah, that's super important. Training them is super important. Hopefully being a good advisor is equally important. I've had unbelievable advisors and mentors in my career, and I can't say that I'd be here without them. So yeah, I take it seriously, training and helping mentor the next generation for sure.
one of the things that I'm excited personally about having you guys on staff and expanding our science team is, in the past, I'm just literally going back 20, 25 years, when we've had a question that we really need answered, we didn't have the in-house expertise to maybe analyze a data set. So we hitched our wagon to a graduate student. And there's so many advantages of working through students: cost, just again, like you were talking, Todd, just the additional benefits of a well-trained professional and the rest of their career. But one of the downsides is time, right? It takes a long time to get information back. So I'm excited. I would imagine, are there conversations you guys are a part of handling some in-house data analysis now rather than I call farming it out?
Yeah, we've had discussions exactly like that, of thinking, okay, is this a good student project, meaning that you can get an answer in a year or two and be able to get a good thesis out of it and a good product? Or is it something that's going to be a little more gnarly? It might not work this year, might take 3-4 years to assemble enough data. Those are the ones we identify as we better do that in-house, because we wouldn't want to hoist that onto a student and cause them to get gray hair before their time.
Well, it is real. Like a graduate student deserves the opportunity to make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, and that's part of the training, right? The training it can be the technical things that they're working on, but to me, it's always been the mental gymnastics that a student goes through. And this is a bit off the cuff here, but when a master's student has one type of a question, and I think there's a tendency to think that a PhD student just has a more complicated question. In your opinion, Todd, what's the difference, or what is the role of going through a bachelor's, master's, PhD?
Cynically, a master's is a 2-year field project and a PhD is a 3-year field project, but not cynically. A PhD project really involves pushing the envelope and answering questions that have never been asked before, or it should, in my mind. And a master's might be redoing something that needs to be redone because we don't know how it works in this landscape, although they did it over here. Let's try it again. And trying stuff again is always a good thing to do in science. And a master's project should be a little more foolproof. But I think the onus there is on the advisor, not the student. And
Okay.
we talk about having a plan B in case this thing that's guaranteed to work doesn't work out. That's our fault.
Yeah.
Do we have something else for that student to do so they can still get their degree and have a thesis and do meaningful science?
It's yeah, for sure. My master's was maybe the most transformative period of my, like, there was a couple of them, but it was such a wake up call in what I really wanted to do, and so it was so important to me. But a PhD is a doctorate of philosophy, right? You need to learn how to philosophize about not only your project, right? Not just mallards or white fronts, but science in general. And so there's a lot of training that goes into that beyond just the project itself.
So the degree of thinking, and also kind of tolerance for mistakes, is that reduced in a PhD?
There'll always be mistakes
Yeah.
in science, and you got to catch them yourself, I think. And I mean, what I mean by that is you set out, you think, this is the way we're going to answer this question, and it doesn't turn out to be the way to answer this question. You've got to think on your feet and adapt and try something a little bit different or ask a different question, that kind of thing. And that's more expected of a PhD, I think.
Okay. I do want to, so I would hope that we have some aspiring waterfowl scientists or managers or biologists listening to this. Hey, let's make that one of our goals, to get people to listen to this particular one. But I remember when I went to college for my bachelor's, 1992 to 1996, and at that time, that was right at a time where people really weren't getting career jobs with a bachelor's degree. So I think it was, when you would go to apply for a job, it was you need a master's or 5 or 6 years of experience, direct experience, and that you could then apply for a certain type of job. So I took a break doing work for about 3 years in the the science field, and then I went and got my master's, got my job, here I am. But then there was also a period of time where people were using their PhD to get a master's job. It was just really, really competitive. And now I'm starting to hear, and because we haven't been hiring too many people in the science discipline over the last 5 or 6 years, but then I'm starting to hear that maybe it's easier to get a job in the waterfowl field. Some people are getting master's jobs with bachelors. How would you guys describe the current academic and hiring pace right now?
I think from my perspective as a university, what you described certainly happened, and you needed more of a degree than you should have for the job position, because we could get a PhD even though this really required a master's. And I put a lot of emphasis on the academic degree and not enough emphasis on the sort of hands-on skills that are part of a lot of wildlife work. So you have a PhD, but you don't know how to back up a trailer and you want a job in fisheries. Mm-hmm. That's not going to work real well. And so I would say to someone aspiring, both things are important. Academically, go to a good school, do well, but know how to behave in the field, be familiar with the field, know your ducks if you want to be a waterfowl biologist, but don't stop at your ducks. Learn all your birds, and be a good field ecologist, be good in the classroom, and don't give up. You'll get a job.
Yeah. As a student or professional now who went to smaller schools, I didn't go to the big R1s, right? But I think everyone says this, but it just could not be more true. Is your network, building your network is so important, and it is what you know in our field for sure, but it is very much who you know as well, and making sure you build through your field projects and through your data analysis, calling the expert in the field, calling Dr. Todd and saying, hey, I'm working on an IPM that we haven't met before, but you're the expert and I have some questions for you. And just building that network is so important in maintaining your career. Just even hearing about jobs sometimes, now it's better now with listservs and job boards and things like that. But knowing who you're applying to and what, how your network fits in with theirs is super important as well.
One of the things that I think has made securing a wildlife career job is because I think when people get a job in the wildlife field, they keep that job for a long period of time. It's such a labor of love, right? I don't know about you guys, but for me, it was just this extension of, it's kind of that, think about what you love to do and find a way to get paid for it. It just so happened that this is what I wanted to do. And so jobs don't turn over super fast. And so what I've noticed is you'll get these more of generational turnover. You'll have a group of people that were hired during a particular period of time. They keep that job for 20, 30 years. They retire. So if you happen to be looking for a job during that time period, wow, it can be easy to get. But then if you happen to be on the other side of it, the inverse can be true. It's just tough to crack.
Yeah.
There's a lot of luck in the timing.
And maybe when you're starting out, you have to be a little more flexible in terms of where I'm willing to go. Working seasonally, you might be bouncing all over the country, doing a breeding ecology position up in the Prairie Pothole region, wintering ecology somewhere on the Gulf Coast. Until you get enough experience, enough networking, and know enough people that when that state agency job comes open or NGO position comes open, you're going to be really qualified to step in there. And then you can stay there forever if you like it.
Then you can stay. And it's easier to switch too, I think, right? Like kind of once you're in a career track position, have developed yourself a decent name, those individuals are quite competitive, I've found, to switch to a different part of the country or maybe a different agency or NGO. So keep that in mind as well. I think I have kind of two bigger questions here. Todd, I want to go to you first. Is, the Million Duck campaign. So that's Delta's endowed campaign to raise 1 million ducks. So that equals forever, right? Mm-hmm. And right now, predator management and hen houses are the kind of the twin bill programs that we're already using to contribute towards that 1 million duck goal, and we're going to get there. So you've been around a lot of the research that's been done, either directly or indirectly, or just familiar with it. So lots of research projects dating back to, what, 1994 or 6?
More than that, but we don't need to go into details.
Yeah.
Into the 80s.
Yeah. So what are some predator management or henhouse research projects that you think, even after 30 plus years of duck production research, do you feel should be conducted, or maybe from some of your discussions here that we will be conducting?
I think a really important question with those two programs is, where do you deploy them most effectively, and how does that change through time? Because it's a dynamic landscape. Wetlands are disappearing, habitats changing, predator communities are changing, predators are learning to do new things. We got these ravens showing up in the north, and staying on top of things and being flexible, I think, with deployment by always monitoring the data that come in to see where is it being most effective, and where are we going to allocate effort going forward. That, I think, is the most important question. And you've got a plan A, predator management, a plan B, hen houses. What's plan C that maybe isn't something that's really cost effective now, but it might be 10, 15 years from now? And are we ready to shift to that when we need to? The endowment can shift to that. The expenditures can if they need to. If we're not monitoring what's happening, we won't know when that change point hits.
I'm personally very excited about what you just said there. I mean, I think it's maybe worth lingering on, is that we intentionally called it the duck production endowment. We didn't call it the predator management and henhouse endowment, because what a fluid and dynamic world that we live in. And so who are we to say that 10, 15, 20, 50 years down the road that those are still the champion tools? The world may change, and so it does allow us to be fluid. It does allow us, our science arm, and frankly the waterfowl community at large, to learn and adapt. But one thing that won't change is Delta's emphasis on duck production. So that is a perpetual pot of money to deliver ducks for duck hunters. And so I just love that blend of representing duck hunters, management, delivering these tools, but science informing that we're doing the right stuff. You had mentioned just one interesting thing there, that perhaps, or there's a chance that with our henhouse production models that we could be underestimating production, at least in one particular area of hen survival. And I know you mentioned it before, back with when you were working with Ducks Unlimited Canada,
Yep.
that you measured really high hen survival in a particular
Right.
part of the pothole country.
And so we don't have a really good handle on it, but maybe during incubation, if a nest gets destroyed, you don't see the evidence if you're just monitoring the nest, but maybe 1 out of 6, 1 out of 8 times, the hen gets killed too. And that's the bigger loss that happens. And so hen houses have a potential to be creating that benefit of increased survival. There's another potential benefit that ducklings get to jump out of a house straight into a wetland. Mm-hmm. And what I know from radiotelemetry studies, where ducklings actually were marked with tiny little radios, and you can't make a radio small enough for a duckling, but the first 1 or 2 days of their life when they're doing overland brood movements is a period of really high mortality. So if you can hatch in a wetland, it's already a good place to be. Jump down, 4 feet, and you're already where you want to be. That's another potential benefit, and I think the hen survival is a bigger one, though.
I suppose it's not a huge contributor, but as we often talk, mallards and pintails being more of the famous re-nesters. If they lose a nest at a certain point in time, they'll attempt again, and clutch size can decline. I suppose it doesn't continually decline, but a first nest tends to have more eggs than subsequent nesting attempts. And so if predator management or hen houses increase the likelihood of that first nest hatching, then I guess you could hatch more eggs in theory.
Yeah, everything about hatching early seems to be beneficial. Larger clutch size, probably better duckling survival. If you do survive as a duckling, your probability of surviving the next year goes up if you hatched earlier. And so getting the first nests of the year to be successful, in terms of counting them, there's still, it's 10 hatched, 9 hatched. That's not that big a reduction, but there's more benefits to hatching early than just a slight reduction in clutch size.
Those are good points. Jay, I don't really know how you're going to answer this one. So as long as I've worked at Delta in the science world, we've had coast-to-coast research projects. I can think of California, I can think of the Carolinas, I can think of Pennsylvania, Ontario. But I think it'd be fair to say that Delta, and it's because we're so focused on the breeding grounds, that a lot of the research that we do is in the center of the continent, the Mississippi and Central Flyways. But it's something that we've been talking about for a few years, which I anticipate will accelerate with you guys here, is having more of a presence in the Atlantic and Pacific flyways. And you don't have to drop particular research projects unless they are at the front of your mind, but kind of describe to the listener what to expect, from your early experience here. What should they expect coming 2, 3, 5 years down the road in terms of our research broadening?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, we're in the process right now of trying to develop with some collaborators proposals for both coasts, and not to take away from the Central or Mississippi flyways at all. Like, that'll still probably always be the core of our research. I guess not always, I shouldn't say, but yeah, taking our big step to expand to both coasts, and looking at projects that are influential in key landscapes, and also that are important to duck hunters, is kind of where I think we're going to keep our focus. So potentially that's banding data that's in places like the San Luis Valley or Chesapeake Bay, or and taking a first couple of steps at expanding projects in the last year or so. But I think more to come, and at a bigger scale for both West and the East Coast.
Okay, perfect. One parting question for each of you, and then I'll thank you for your time. But if you had one message, and it's going to be the same question, we're just going to go with you first, Todd. If you had one message for duck hunters about why they should care about the research that we do at Delta, why should they care?
Just one. That's the hard part. In terms of research I do, and a lot of hunters don't agree with this, but research I've done suggests that harvest has very minimal impact on most species, and that should make you feel good about what you do in guilt-free hunting season. And yet hunters care so much about the resource, they're convinced that, we've got to harvest less, that must be the reason. Part of what I do is going to keep being aimed at investigating that, and if I'm wrong, I'll admit it. And if you think I'm wrong, you'll tell me. But we can have some good discussions about that. But I think the impact of harvest has been way overestimated, and that's an area I intend to keep working on.
Well, then I encourage everybody to listen to your work with an open mind. So if you're going to admit you're wrong, I think it goes both ways. That duck hunters just need to be open to that thought that maybe. And you're right. I love that. So I'm just going to double down on that. Duck hunters care so much about the resource that it's just logical. It's logical to think that I shot something, it's not there, there's fewer. But ducks are food. They die all the time. And so, yeah, I'm going to encourage people to listen we'll get you back on here. We can talk about other stuff, and you can open everybody's minds, including mine. One of the things that I say about the podcast is, I've been around waterfowl a lot, but I get to bring on experts, and I get to learn too. So some of the questions are for me, and if the listener finds it useful, great. But Jay, why would you suggest to a duck hunter that they should really pay attention to the science that Delta does, or that you in particular are interested in coming up?
Yeah, Todd highlighted that science is it's a lot of failure to learn at the end of it, right? So it's a progressive updating of information, and as your landscape changes as a duck hunter, our information changes with it. And so, for looking at folks who are in management related positions who want to use science to drive the best practices going forward for duck hunting, and whether that's seasons or bags or anything that influences a duck hunter, science needs to inform that. And I think all of our agencies are on that same boat, right? Like we need to use the best information, most up-to-date information to inform those management strategies and going forward and developing future scenarios of what this looks like. And so caring about Delta science means helping to inform the decisions that get made at the end of the day.
Well said. Todd, you and I need to up our fashion game.
Yeah, we do. Next to this guy?
Yeah.
I know it.
Where does one find it?
Listen, I was at Shields here in Bismarck this weekend, and I don't know who makes the shirt, so if you're watching, I'm sorry. I grabbed it off the shelf. I said, I need this. And I got to the counter, and it was $100, and I was already too late. I was too far down the line, and so I went for it. But it's nice. It's comfy and stretchy, but
and I feel better that we complimented you on it than if you spent that kind of bank on it.
Yeah,
that
well,
is an
it was a need to have purchase, and so I went for it.
A little bit, maybe too much redhead heads on canvasback bodies, but I'm quibble.
That's the tough thing. You know, we can be such critics of wildlife art, can't we? Because you just know too much.
Yeah.
But
I feel that way about taxidermy. If I get something mounted, it has to be from somebody who's going to do it right. I don't want to look at it every day and look at all the anatomical stuff. Like, I would change that.
Well, great. This will be the first conversation of many. John Devney's been on here the last couple times, and I've kind of teased him that I think he might be the most frequent guest so far, and that therefore I owe him a T-shirt. But we'll start getting T-shirts but different T-shirts for a number of appearances. How's that?
Yeah,
sounds
there
great.
You go.
Fantastic. Thanks for your time, and
Thank you.
look forward to working with you guys for years to come.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Sounds good.
You bet.
The Voice of the Duck Hunter, a podcast presented by Delta Waterfowl.